The city of Los Angeles had always glimmered under a veil of glamour, a place where fashion, fame, and fantasy intertwined to form the perfect illusion of perfection. But on the night Luna died, that illusion shattered like glass beneath a tire. The official report was simple. Luna Nozawa, former Forrester Creations designer, struck by a car while escaping from prison custody. Bradley Baker, ever efficient and conveniently silent, signed off the paperwork in record time. The media mourned briefly, social media spiraled, and the world moved on. Yet, in a city that thrives on spectacle, something about Luna's death was too clean, too swift, too invisible. There was no footage of her body, no leaked photo from a crime scene, not even a grainy glimpse of her final moments. And in the shadows of Beverly Hills, whispers began to bloom that Luna might not be dead at all. Katie Logan was not supposed to be part of that nightmare. She had her own troubles, humiliating, exhausting troubles. Forrester Creations, the empire that had once felt like home, had just exiled her. Brooke, the sister she loved and envied in equal measure, had replaced her as head of public relations. The announcement came like a knife dressed in silk. It's time for a new image. Katie knew what that really meant. She was outdated, outmaneuvered, and unwanted. The corridors she'd once walked with authority now swallowed her presence. Whispers followed her, sympathy laced with superiority. By the time she cleared her desk, her pride was already in tatters. But she could handle humiliation. She had before. What she could not handle was what came next. It began with a message, no sender, no name, only a single line. "You killed her, didn't you?" Katie stared at the words, her heart thudding painfully against her ribs. It was absurd. She hadn't even seen Luna since the scandal that landed the young designer in prison. But before she could process it, another message came through, a grainy photo of her car parked near the site of Luna's alleged accident. Katie's breath caught. That was impossible. She hadn't been anywhere near there. But the photo was time-stamped, and worse, it was real. The metallic blue of her vehicle, the cracked curb, the eerie reflection of headlights in the distance, all damning details. At first, she thought it was a cruel prank. Maybe someone in PR wanted to humiliate her further. But when she received the third message, a short video clip showing a figure resembling her stepping out of the car moments before the crash, the chill in her bones deepened. The face wasn't entirely visible, but the movements, the coat, even the hair were disturbingly familiar. Whoever was doing this wasn't mocking her. They were setting her up. Bill Spencer was the first person she called, though she hesitated. Their relationship had always been a storm of loyalty and betrayal. He was the father of her child, but trust between them had long since cracked. Still, when his deep, measured voice answered, she felt a flicker of safety. That flicker vanished as soon as she told him the story. Bill didn't say it, but she heard it in his silence, the doubt. He'd loved Luna once, or at least been captivated by her ambition. Her death had shaken him in ways Katie didn't understand. Now, faced with the possibility that his ex-lover might be connected, even framed, in Luna's death, he seemed torn between two ghosts, the woman he once desired and the one he still claimed to protect. The tension between them grew with each new clue. Katie began to notice small details that didn't align with the official story. Luna's so-called escape from prison had been suspiciously unguarded. The cameras near the exit had all malfunctioned within minutes of each other. The guard on duty was transferred out of town 2 days later. And Bradley Baker, who once chased every case with unrelenting precision, refused to return her calls. Every door she knocked on closed tighter. Every record she requested had been accidentally misplaced. It became clear that someone wanted the world to believe in Luna's death and in Katie's guilt. The narrative was too convenient, too cinematic. Katie, emotionally unstable after being fired, drives to confront Luna, a disgraced designer who had once humiliated Forrester Creations with scandal, and in a fit of rage, accidentally kills her. It was a perfect story, tragic, believable, and irreversible. Except it wasn't true. Katie's paranoia grew with every passing day. She started seeing figures outside her house, shadows that vanished when she turned on the lights. Her phone would light up in the middle of the night with distorted recordings of Luna's voice whispering her name. At first, she thought grief or guilt was breaking her down, but then she found a flash drive on her doorstep. Inside was a folder labeled Confessions. The file contained edited audio clips, her own voice spliced together from old interviews and conversations, cut to sound like a confession of murder. Someone was building a case piece by piece, and soon it would be too late to stop it. In desperation, Katie did the unthinkable. She reached out to Sheila Carter. The very name made her skin crawl, but Sheila knew darkness better than anyone. If someone was manipulating evidence, staging deaths, or using psychological warfare, Sheila would know how. Their alliance was uneasy, fueled by necessity rather than trust. Sheila was almost amused by Katie's plea. "You're learning what it feels like to be hunted," she said. But beneath her smirk, Sheila recognized the pattern, the precision, the psychological cruelty. Whoever was orchestrating this wasn't acting alone. There was power behind it, resources, access, and intent. Sheila's help came at a cost. Katie had to agree to keep her involvement secret from everyone, especially Bill. It tore her apart to hide it from him, but she had no choice. With Sheila's network, she traced the source of the messages to a private server routed through multiple layers of encryption. The trail led them to a name that made Katie's stomach twist: Will Spencer. Her son. The realization was too horrific to believe. But when she confronted him, the look on his face said more than words could. He hadn't sent the messages, but he knew something. After hours of silence, Will finally confessed that Luna had contacted him weeks before her death. She claimed she'd discovered something dangerous about Forrester Creations, an internal conspiracy involving falsified financials and experimental materials that could destroy the company's reputation. She wanted Will's help to expose it, knowing his family ties to both Bill and Katie could give her leverage. But before she could release the evidence, she vanished. And then the accident happened. Katie's blood ran cold. If Luna had uncovered something that powerful, someone had every reason to silence her, or to make it look like she was gone. And if Will had been in contact with her, then his life was in danger too. The theory that Luna was still alive stopped sounding paranoid. It began to sound inevitable. As Katie dug deeper, she began to suspect that Bradley Baker's quick handling of the case wasn't incompetence, it was compliance. Files were sealed without authorization. The coroner's report lacked signatures. Even the supposed death certificate was full of inconsistencies. When she and Sheila hacked into the city morgue's records, they found that Luna's body had never been delivered. Officially, it was transferred to a private facility for cremation, but the facility didn't exist. Meanwhile, Bill's loyalty began to fracture. Torn between his guilt and his fear, he started investigating on his own, trying to find out whether Luna's ghostly presence in their lives was real or imagined. Late-night calls came to him too, Luna's voice, pleading for help, distorted but unmistakable. It pushed him to the brink. He began to question whether he was protecting the right person. Katie's world collapsed further when a warrant was issued for her arrest. The anonymous evidence had reached the police, the photos, the doctored confessions, the video. Overnight, she became a suspect in a murder that might not have even happened. As cameras flashed outside her home and reporters swarmed, she realized that she had been completely isolated. Brooke refused to comment, Eric stayed silent, and even Ridge distanced himself. Only Sheila remained, a dark mirror reminding her that sometimes to prove innocence, one must wade through filth. The final blow came when Will was taken. His phone went dead mid-call, his car found abandoned near Mulholland Drive. A message arrived minutes later on Katie's phone. "You wanted the truth? Meet me where it began." Attached was a location, the old Forrester warehouse, the same place where Luna's first scandal had erupted. When Katie arrived, the building was dark, the air heavy with the smell of dust and oil. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, thin, trembling, alive. Luna. She wasn't dead. But she wasn't free either. Her face was pale, her eyes haunted, as if she had lived through something worse than death. She explained in fragments. She had been working undercover, trying to expose a black market supply chain tied to Forrester's European division. When she got too close, someone faked her death to silence her. But the operation had continued, and now the same people were using her death to destroy anyone who might stumble onto the truth, including Katie. Before Katie could react, headlights flooded the room. Men in masks surrounded them. Shots were fired, and chaos erupted. Sheila appeared from nowhere, pulling Katie to safety while Luna disappeared again into the darkness. When the dust settled, only one truth remained. The conspiracy was bigger than any of them imagined. Bradley Baker was on the payroll of a syndicate using Forrester's global network to launder money and distribute experimental materials banned in the U.S. Luna had uncovered it. Katie had become the scapegoat. Months later, Los Angeles had moved on again. The tabloids wrote it off as another tragic Logan scandal. Katie lived quietly, exonerated but not free. Bill visited occasionally, their conversations strained but civil. Will was home, but changed, older, quieter, carrying secrets his mother couldn't reach. At night, when the city lights flickered against her window, Katie still heard echoes of Luna's voice. Somewhere, in another corner of the city, Luna was alive, watching, waiting, rebuilding her own vengeance. And Katie knew that as long as the truth remained buried, none of them would ever truly escape. The glamour of Forrester Creations would shine again, but beneath its polished surface, something rotten would always pulse. The memory of betrayal, the ghost of a woman who refused to die, and the reminder that in Los Angeles, no one stays buried forever. The morning of Katie's arrest was eerily quiet. A heavy fog rolled over Los Angeles, blurring the edges of the city as if reality itself wanted to look away. The tabloids were still whispering about Luna's possible survival, but by sunrise, those whispers had turned to something colder: accusations, headlines, proof. Katie Logan's name once again dominated every screen, but this time it wasn't about her beauty, her career, or her heartbreaks. It was about murder. Will had been the one to bring the evidence forward. The revelation stunned everyone who knew them. The same boy Katie had sacrificed everything for, the son she had shielded from scandal, from Bill's ruthless world, from the poisoned glamour of Forrester, had walked into the LAPD with a folder of files and a trembling hand. He had spent months digging through Luna's encrypted archives, connecting between corrupted Forrester accounts, hidden surveillance footage, and digital traces of his mother's movements the night Luna was allegedly killed. What he found was damning. The footage was brutal in its clarity. A highway camera, previously dismissed as malfunctioning, had been restored through forensic software. It showed Katie's car following Luna's prison transport van. Minutes later, the van veered off the road. Another angle caught Luna stumbling into the darkness, and then, the flash of headlights. The impact was swift, the scream barely audible. The car didn't stop, and the license plate matched Katie's. It was the final piece the police needed. Within hours, they arrived at her home. Katie stood at the window when the sirens wailed down the street, her face pale, her mind blank. For days, she had lived under suspicion, but the sight of Will stepping out of a police car, his eyes red-rimmed and distant, shattered her. She didn't resist when they cuffed her hands. She didn't speak as they read her rights. She simply stared at her son, the boy she had once rocked to sleep, and saw in him the reflection of everything she had lost. Bill arrived moments later, furious and broken. He demanded answers, but Will couldn't meet his eyes. His voice cracked as he explained that he hadn't meant to destroy her, only to find the truth. He believed in justice, in the idea that clearing Luna's name would also clear his conscience. But as the cell door slammed behind Katie, the weight of what he'd done settled like lead in his chest. In the sterile coldness of her holding cell, Katie replayed her entire life. Every decision, every betrayal, every compromise that brought her here. She had spent years fighting to prove she wasn't like Brooke, impulsive, destructive, hungry for control. But somewhere along the way, she had become something worse. Hollow, exhausted, driven by fear. She swore she hadn't killed Luna. But when she saw the evidence, even she began to doubt herself. The video was clear. The timestamps matched. The GPS from her car aligned perfectly with the crash site. She couldn't explain it, and no one believed her anymore. Outside the prison walls, Will couldn't sleep. He kept rewatching the footage, hoping for something, a frame, a flicker, anything that could make it less real. But the more he looked, the more the truth seemed to harden. Yet a small part of him refused to accept it. His mother had flaws, but murder? It didn't fit. Not even in her darkest moments. And so he went back to the beginning, to Luna. The orphanage was an old building on the outskirts of Los Angeles, surrounded by eucalyptus trees that whispered in the wind. Will had traced Luna's charity donations years before her imprisonment and discovered a connection, an anonymous child sponsorship fund she maintained under a false name. The fund was still active. When he visited, the caretaker led him through narrow hallways filled with laughter and the smell of disinfectant. And then he saw her, a little girl with Luna's eyes. Her name was Hannah. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old, with the same delicate features and shy smile that Luna once carried. The caretaker explained that she had been dropped off in the middle of the night by a woman claiming to be a relative. There were no records, no birth certificate, nothing but a faded bracelet with an engraved L. Will felt something shift inside him, a recognition that went beyond logic. He knew instantly that this was Luna's daughter. Holding the child's hand, he realized what the entire web of lies had been about. Luna hadn't died trying to escape prison. She had been running to protect her child from the people who wanted her silenced, from those who would use the girl as leverage. The accident, the cover-up, even the framing of his mother, it was all part of a design much bigger than any of them. But the world didn't care about the truth. The trial date for Katie was set within weeks. The prosecution painted her as a woman spiraling from failure, fired, humiliated, desperate to reclaim control. They claimed Luna had reached out to her before the escape, threatening to expose Forrester's unethical practices. In a moment of rage, Katie had supposedly chased her down, struck her, and staged the disappearance. The narrative was perfect, airtight, and cruel. Will tried to intervene. He testified that his mother was unstable but not violent, that she'd been manipulated. Yet each word he spoke seemed to twist the knife deeper. Every defense he offered made her seem guiltier. Every piece of evidence he presented seemed to turn against her. And behind it all, the shadow of someone unseen still pulled the strings. Late one night, Will received a message on the same encrypted app Luna had used. "You think you know what happened, but you've only seen what you were meant to." Attached was a short video. Luna, alive, holding the same child he'd found. Her voice was shaky but defiant. "They'll destroy anyone who gets close. Protect her. Don't trust anyone, not even the Logans." The world around Will tilted. His heart raced as he realized the enormity of it all. Luna was alive, and she was watching. But she hadn't come forward to save his mother.
Why?
Was she afraid, or was she part of the manipulation now? When Will visited Katie again, she looked thinner, older. The light in her eyes had dimmed, but when he told her about the video, something in her revived. Hope, sharp and dangerous. She gripped his hand through the glass. "Find her," she whispered. "Find Luna, and make them see what they've done." Will did more than that. He took Hannah into protective custody, hiring private investigators under a false identity. He stopped answering Bill's calls. He dug deeper into Forrester's financial records and discovered that the same shell corporations Luna had traced were still active, not under the Forresters, but under a subsidiary owned by a name he hadn't expected, Bradley Baker. The detective who had closed Luna's case was now profiting from her supposed death. That realization cracked open everything. Will understood that the evidence against his mother, the car footage, the confessions, even the messages, had all been built by the same network that once silenced Luna. But by the time he pieced it together, it was too late. Katie had been convicted. The verdict came on a sweltering afternoon, the courtroom packed, the air electric with judgment.
Guilty.
Life imprisonment. Will stood frozen as his mother's face crumpled. Bill tried to intervene, shouting that the system was corrupted, but the gavel drowned him out. Katie didn't cry. She simply nodded once, as if accepting that this was the price of someone else's truth. That night, Will made a vow. He would find Luna. He would expose Baker and the network behind her disappearance. And he would clear his mother's name, no matter how deep the darkness ran. The last scene before the curtain fell was quiet. A boy, barely a man, walking through the orphanage garden, the child clinging to his hand. The city lights flickered in the distance, and somewhere beyond them, a woman with haunted eyes watched from the shadows. Luna was alive, yes, but her silence carried a message far more chilling than death. Because in Los Angeles, the dead don't stay buried, and the living aren't always innocent.
Oh.